Over the last few weeks, we've been looking at the Psalms and how relevant they are to us in today's modern age. And we thought we'd have a conversation today with a person who is a bit of an expert on Psalms, having released 6 albums in the period 1985 to 1992. It's of course Ian White. And Ian, it's great to meet you today, especially in lockdown. It's good to be able to meet up with people. And I just want to take you back to 1983, Ian, when it all started and you started planning the Psalms project. How on earth did you get involved in it in the first place?
It was really a kind of mountaintop experience in a church weekend. We've all done that kind of thing. You go away on a weekend, you get inspired, and you come back and you say, that's it. And for me, it was, that's it, I'm going to write some songs. You know, I'd been playing for quite a few years. I'd started off my music apprenticeship with sort of playing guitar for an evangelist called Dave Pope in 1979. And but I hadn't really written anything. I was back at university in Aberdeen doing a theology degree, and came back from this church weekend and said, that's it. And I can't even remember the exact moment, but it was something like, I tell you what, I'll just start with an apprenticeship. I'll just use God's songbook. I'll just use the Psalms.
Which is exactly what it's known as. I mean, predominantly written by David. I mean, there are smaller books for you to look at, but did you set out with the aim of doing most of the Psalms in the 150 that there are?
Well, no, I didn't, Linz. It was, but I was quite persevering. I thought, this is it. I'm really going to do something here. I didn't even start at Psalm 1 because I was combining it with, we had one of the little courses of Bible knowledge we had at college at the time was asking us to look at Psalms 120 to 150, that sort of last book, last section of Psalms. So if anybody knows the numbering of the Psalms, that Psalms Volume 1 came out, it doesn't start with 1. It starts with Psalms around, I think the very first one on Psalms Volume 1 is Psalm 122. And I just got into a pattern of writing a little tune and initially was never really thinking that this was going to be that life-changing for me. I was just doing my theology thinking I might end up being a pastor or something, and gradually it just seemed to gain ground because I started to get excited about the tunes that came out.
And obviously you had to write your own sort of music. Did you sort of refer back to Hebrew melodies, or did you just start completely afresh, Ian?
Really just completely afresh. I mean, I've always felt that music is a constantly changing thing through different cultures. And music has happily been used at all stages and cultures all the way around the world, and the Psalms will have been used hundreds of times in different cultural music. So I basically tried to just use what was in me. I'd grown up in the Simon and Garfunkel generation, the light folk pop kind of thing. It was who I was. I tried not to be change that at all. Tried not to be perverse with it. I thought, I'm just going to let come out of me what comes out, and that's what happened.
And it seems to me that you weren't specifically writing worship songs to be sung congregationally. Were you in some cases doing that?
No, not one thought, which is why they never really worked. They were never that good congregationally, because I'd never written them for that. And I remember an Irish friend, summed it up for me years later. He said, or had said to a friend, I'm going to sum up Ian White's music. He said, when I'm in church, I want to sing Graham Kendrick, but when I'm in my car on the way home from church, I want to listen to Ian White. And it was kind of nice for me because, but there was very little, there was no calculation really, Linz, as I was doing it. From what I remember, here were some key things. I remember thinking, I'm not going to treat this academically. I'm going to try and treat this with a kind of
from the heart.
a kind of spiritual gut feeling. I can remember thinking, if this is going to be a spirit-led thing, if this is going to be something, if I believe that this is scripture and that the Holy Spirit is in there, then I'm just going to try and be my little version of a mirror. It's been done hundreds of times before around the world, but I'll just try and mirror what's in there. And if I can just catch something of the spirit of each psalm. So the only kind of rules I was making were, I thought, I'll use New International Version. I can remember going to the Old Testament professor, telling him what I was doing, Bill Johnson in Aberdeen, and I said, I've got this wee project going. What do you think are the best translations? And he said, well, King James or NIV. And I just came down with NIV.
It would have been a completely different project if you'd gone down the King James route, to be perfectly honest.
So there we went. And in fact, it's quite nice because I've still got in the house the old NIV that I just opened every day, and I would open it up, and my little pattern was to open to the psalm of the day if I was doing it, because there were, suppose like all of us, with periods of meditation or quiet time or anything, you do find for a few weeks and then there's a bit of a overlap, So it wasn't one every day solidly for 150 days, but there were periods where, there's periods on the albums where literally there are sections on those albums when there are 4 tracks in a row that were literally done 4 days in a row. It was
incredible.
Yeah. They really were like little, I'm on a roll here, which every writer, every album you ever hear documentaries about, they'll say that. They'll say those few days were just a sweet spot.
A purple patch, and yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And a wee example of that would have been 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 4. So I rejoice with those who said to me, let's go to the house of the Lord. I lift my eyes to you, whose home is in heaven. And if the Lord had not been on our side, would we still be swept away? 3 days, 3 tunes, and I can remember that going, the pattern was I would just read it. I would never try and make it rhyme. Again, everybody's different. I just read the NIV, and the strange thing was I didn't have any recorder. I could very basically write notation. I've never been very good at reading music, but I knew basically my crotchets and things. So my little pattern, I can still see it, had this wee table. Carol and I had just got married the year before, so we had our wee flat in Albert Street in Aberdeen. And the pattern was manuscript book open, Bible open, come home from lectures, do your homework, whatever, and then sit down and try and do the psalm of the day. So you would read through it, and then just try and pray over it and say, what am I hearing here? And I tried to make a wee rule that I would just start playing, not think, but just try and start playing. And the moment I had a tune, if the Lord had not been on our side, I would literally just go da-da-da, 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 and knot it down. And I've still got, in the shelf there, I've still got all I had to work on. There were no recordings right the way through the 6.
And did you feel under pressure under pressure to do justice to the text when you were writing songs? Or maybe at the start there wasn't an awful lot of pressure, but maybe when you got to volumes 4 and 5, you were thinking, I better make a good job of this.
Well, again, you go back to they say you can end up losing your faith when you go and do a theology degree, but when you speak to an Old Testament professor, and he'll say things like, honestly, he says, if you actually see what the Hebrew looks like, you realize that translation is an amazingly kind of spiritually led thing of trying to work out what is actually being said in this Hebrew. So he just said, stick to the NIV as much as you like, but if you have to there are places where there are a couple of words that I change. But I think people would probably agree that maybe in comparison to some other settings of Psalms, I'm pretty much, a lot of the time, it's pretty much to NIV.
I would say so, because a lot of people I've spoken to, when they read some of the Psalms, they actually hear your songs. Psalm 133, how good and pleasant.
Uh-huh.
I hear that every time I hear your song, every time I read that psalm. How does that make you feel? That must.
Well, I'm just remembering back to what was, having, all these years later and having done music for so long and been around loads of writers and realizing that if you're blessed with one great sweet spot, Linz, in your writing life, when you write a few hits and you speak to people and they'll say, well, it just felt easy for those few days. I was just kind of in the moment and in the flow. And I think I look back with huge thankfulness that that was the real, in that wee flat with one wee manuscript book, I did something that has blessed a lot of people. And for me at the time, it just felt like when you're on a roll with something, and it came to an end. I mean, a far, far bigger part of my life was touring the world, singing the same songs that I'd written on that wee table. But still, if you said to me, what was the sweetest moment? Like for all, the sweetest moment, what was that? Because it was very uncalculated. I had no idea that there would be years when I was leading them in front of thousands of people and playing on 5 continents with them. I had no idea that was ever going to happen.
Humble beginnings.
But it felt very real at that time.
And I'm just thinking about what the Psalms actually mean to yourself, because you were very, very involved with them. You were poring over them, writing songs. It must have affected you. What did you take from it spiritually, in the sense of the Psalms?
Well, they're strange. They've got so many powerful lines that have fed, into Christianity. The whole fact, this isn't the place to get into big theological stuff about why we have the Old Testament, but I can remember the kind of very simple adage: if it's good enough for Jesus, it should be good enough for us. There's a kind of the link between Christianity is defined by Judaism, if you like, and Judaism defined by Christianity. The link between the two was just so huge, and that spiritual link of pieces of absolute timeless wisdom lead us to the rock that is higher than I. The one, Psalm 3, you're a shield around me, Lord, my glorious one that lifts up my head. There are so many lines which listeners to this will know, so many that have just carried and carried. They've found their way into literature all around the world. They're in the fabric of literary culture and musical culture. And that is not for nothing. So I've absolutely no regrets about that as my starting point.
Yeah. And when you think about it now, the Psalms are so relevant. I mean, God's word is relevant today as it was back then, but especially in times of lockdown and concern about coronavirus, a lot of people are relying on the Psalms. There's something timeless about that. Would you not agree?
Yeah, well, I think it's that there's something wrong with your theology, your view of God. If the moment a crisis happens, you think God can't be there because of this and this, just have a look through history at how bad. I mean, we relatively have it easy medically compared to what Black Death and plagues were like before. What people have had to cope with globally, with epidemics, with no medical stuff. There have been anybody who's, I'm not a historian, but whenever you delve into history, you realize that the world's been pretty disastrous right the way down. And all the time, God's people, the Christian faith, have just brought up sweetness. People have come out. I was speaking with someone earlier about a people with great challenge in their family, and how a sweetness, a sort of fragrance of God comes out, and has done. So people are no different. What I've always said about the Psalms is they address your heart. They address exactly what you're like. God knows exactly how fickle and rubbish we all are. Loves us to bits, sees the love, and so there's this huge component of the Psalms of digging into who you are.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I'm found out.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. and then you can, sorry about thumping that, and then you combine that with the fact that we're living in the world as it is.
Absolutely. And I always think that I heard somewhere that, well, I come from a blues music background. I know that
and
you have leanings towards
play
that.
blues very well.
It's very kind of you, but you have a blues background as well. And I once heard that somebody say that David was the original blues man. You know, in terms of the Psalms, they were sort of.
Yeah, well, I suppose if we take the word blues as being taking complaint and kind of making sweetness from it.
Yeah.
So you take a situation, and there are so many psalms which take difficulty and make sweetness. I do a version of Psalm 13, which ends up with saying, despite all the rubbish, I'm still going to praise the name of the Lord. And I remember being in an interview situation. Thankfully, it was off camera, or the guy would have been embarrassed. He was a journalist. He was a journalist like you, Linz, but he said, I mean, some of the Psalms are really difficult. I mean, can you imagine anyone actually writing a version of Psalm 13? And I had just released one on Psalms Volume 2, and I said, yeah, you know, and it's been one that's used because there's no degree. What's the Elton John line? Sad songs say so much.
Yeah.
There's no country songs, tradition, not so much the new country, but traditional country music was absolutely throat-slittingly depressing a lot of the time with the subject
But it connected
matter.
with people.
It connected
In the same way that the blues does, in the same way that the Psalms still connect with people.
So there's definitely this music component that just comforts through difficulty.
Yeah. If you had to choose, I'll give you two. If you had to choose two Psalms that were your recordings that were the favourite, what would you choose? Or is it too difficult? Is it like choosing your favourite child?
It's hard. But I'm going to pick. I'm going to pick Psalm 3, which has this blues line at the beginning of it, saying, "Lord, everyone's out to get me. It says, oh Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise against me? How many say of me that God will not deliver him?" Which is the horrible goading people, saying, where's your God now? Call yourself a Christian, kind of thing, which we've, that kind of thing.
It's so relevant today.
And then it moves into this poem, which is just, Lord, you're a shield. Again, a relevant word at the moment. You lift my head up. No matter how much is coming up against me, you are still God, and I'm still going to praise you. So I'm going to hold out for Psalm 3.
Excellent choice as well. Let's talk a bit about the Inspiration Orchestra, because you've been involved in that for a number of years now.
It's 6 years now.
Yeah. Would you tell us a bit about what the Inspiration Orchestra involves, what it is, and what you do with the orchestra?
I didn't really see it coming. I mean, I had never felt any particular empathy towards people with disabilities, even though general kind of Christian ethos. I was very aware that caring for the weak, caring for poverty in all forms, there's a component, right from Jesus himself saying that there's a rich man moaning at him, and he says, "Away and sell up what you got, and just go and sell and give to the poor." St. Francis of Assisi with a grumbling monk saying, "Away and stay in a hut with a leper for 6 months. That will sort you out." Mother Teresa just saying, "Work with the poor. It's sacramental." It's one of the things she said. She said, "It'll sort you out."
Yeah.
So I had all that in my life. I've been on mission trips. When you're a sort of well-known singer, you often get sort of flagship. Like I've been in slums with Tear Fund and different places and parts of the world, because they'll say to you, "We'll pay you, come and walk around a slum with us." You've seen it, We'll come and walk around a slum with us, then go back and do concerts for us and raise money. And I've done that in my career. So I was always aware of this main Christian thing, as all your listeners will, that your involvement in some way with the poor is a great thing, and it's so close to Jesus' heart. But there was never anything on all those years, nothing had ever really hit me. And then when I was, my whole, as you know, the whole touring career just
died down.
It died down. It does. I had a 25-year run of it, which isn't at all bad, I think. And Canoe Church here, which took me in for a while and said, why don't you do a little bit of work for us? You know, still as their freelance musician, if you like. But we have some things in the parish. For example, we have the Upper Springland home up the road on Isle Road. Why don't you just go in and play your guitar in there as part of a kind of, you know,
to severely disabled adults? And
yeah. For people who don't know, the Upper Springland home would be it's a residential and daycare place for people with severe disabilities, and that was my beginning. And I was introduced to people who were really more disabled than I'd ever. You know, these are people, you know, cerebral palsy at a very extreme level where people can't talk, maybe in a wheelchair with a wheelchair user with one finger of one hand able to operate, no speech. And there's that whole curve of getting over even the awkwardness, which I think a lot of people have to say, what do you say? How do you, and all I can remember, this is about 7 years ago now, is just ending up with one person and saying, I think I could get you to put a hand on a keyboard.
And make a sound.
And make a sound.
Yeah.
So I brought in a keyboard, put it onto a string synth sound, and holding a drone note, playing a simple song, and suddenly I've got someone who for 35 years has never, ever been empowered.
To make music or play.
It hadn't happened. And that was the seed, that was the kernel. It then grew because another person would hear that I did it. I would end up with a wee class. I ended up with the time structure within the home there of realizing that I couldn't get that much done. So I approached one or two of the parents of people who were there and said, could I actually, in my own time, no cost to you, could I drive out to your house and sit for a longer, more intense time with one person? And that was a real key thing. All of us know the value of that one-to-one tuition.
Yeah. And then it became an orchestra. You realized that you were able to do
that. And we had no name. It was one of the players themselves that came out and said, I think we should call it the Inspiration Orchestra. The period of time with Canoe Church ended, and one thing led to another, and a wonderful group of people gathered around me and said, let's formalize this properly. Let's actually go through the process of doing the paperwork to become a proper Scottish registered charity, which we are now.
Yeah.
And I think we're 3 years in to the Inspiration Orchestra. It is now an established charity. I have 20 people I give regular lessons to, and we do public concerts.
And I've seen you many times in concert, and it is inspiring, as per the name, but there's an awful lot of joy that is just exuded, and the music's good as well. So you must be really pleased. Must be hard though in lockdown. What are you doing in lockdown to keep things going?
Like everyone, it really moved into the sphere initially of making. I made training DVDs for people without. Handling all of the Zoom stuff and everything is often not really appropriate for someone with strong disabilities. So it's sitting in the same wee corner. We're in my garden here, and in this wee corner, I've probably made about 20 videos where I'll just make. I found they were really appreciated. I would sing the same songs over and over again, but addressing them to an individual. A real key to the whole Inspiration Orchestra thing has been the individual treatment of the person. So I'll be saying, hello, Michael, right, you play like the person I'm quoting doesn't see very well, so I have a kind of braille system. I have a little thing. So I say, Michael, find the one with 3 pieces of wood in it. Okay, and here we go. And you like Rod Stewart songs, so we play, try and pick the songs that they all like. About half of them are gospel songs, half of them are just pop songs. And in the last couple of weeks, I've managed to get into people's gardens. So I've been doing little sort of garden rehearsals like this. But wanted to say thank you, actually, since we're with PBC. We've had lovely support from quite a few people. I've been up to speak at one of your there's an afternoon club. I can't remember. Do you remember the name?
Is it Friendship Lunch?
Might be. What's another one? Maybe there's an afternoon one.
There's a camera club. They do that sort of thing.
You'll know who it is.
the people will know.
Actually, people at PBC have been very, very supportive. Quite a few folk have been coming. We have a little charity shop on South Street as well. A few people from PBC have been in there, which is wonderful, and we're hoping to reopen in a couple of weeks' time. But everybody who comes into contact with it has just been hugely encouraging to me, and I would have never thought this would be the kind of end phase of my working life, but I couldn't wish for anything better.
Well, thanks, Ian, for joining us. And when you think about it, it all started with the Psalms.
Yeah.
It's quite incredible. And Ian's now going to play his version of Psalm 3.
Oh Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise against me? How many say of me that God will not deliver him? But you are a shield around me, Lord, my glorious one, who lifts up my head. To the Lord I cry aloud, and from his holy hill he answers me. I lie down and I sleep, but I wake again, sustained by the Lord. I need not fear 10,000 men drawn up against me on every side. Arise, O Lord, deliver me, for I have seen you deal with your enemies. From the Lord deliverance comes. May your blessing be on all your people. May your blessing be on all your people. May your blessing